Hi, everyone. Welcome to AABA's Walking the Walk initiatives to diversify the legal profession. I just want to give people a few minutes to log on to make sure that everybody could get on with their audio and video okay. So we'll start promptly at 5:05 in just a couple of minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started now. I will start with a few announcements. Welcome again, for those of you who are just joining us, to the initiatives to diversify the legal profession, hosted by AABA. I am Alison Tsao. I am one of the co-chairs of AABA's Solo and Small Firms Committee, and I will be moderating our event tonight. Before we get started, I do want to make a couple brief announcements. First of all, AABA has recently launched its in-house compensation survey, and Kriti Rajput will tell us a little bit about that, and we urge you all who are in-house to fill out that survey. Those who participate and fill in the survey will get a copy of the results when it's available. The Solo and Small Firm Committee is also hosting an upcoming virtual event on November 5th called the Diversity Referral Night, where people who sign up will be able to present a short pre-recorded video of their practice and their areas of expertise, and have an opportunity to network with other members of the audience at the event. So we highly encourage people to sign up for that event. Check it out if you've never experienced it before. We've done it virtual. We've never done it virtually, so this will be the first time we're doing it virtually, but we're excited and we hope you'll join us there. This event is eligible for 1.25 hours of California Elimination of Bias MCLE credit. Please sign in for this event by clicking the link in the live chat or by clicking the link at the beginning of the video description. In the video description, you will also find links to the written materials, an evaluation form, and the event registration form. If you fill in the event registration form, we will be able to send out certificates of attendance to all registered attendees. And if you have not yet registered, please do so on AABA's website at the link in the video description. Now I'd like to introduce my esteemed Panelists for this evening, we have a full panel, and so my introductions will be necessarily brief. And I apologize in advance for not being able to give all the time that I would like to give otherwise to all of our accomplished panelists tonight. But we do want to get into the substance of our presentation and allow for some questions and answers at the end. So our presentation will go up to 6 o'clock, and then from 6 to 6:15, we will have an open floor for questions and invite you all to ask questions then. Please feel free to type in your questions at any point in time during our panel discussion, and if we don't address it right then, we will address it at the end of our presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, who is Kriti Rajput. Kriti joined AppDynamics, which is part of Cisco, in June as Senior Corporate Counsel and primarily supports the check transactions team. She's a legal representative for AppDynamics Community Action Challenge in the Stand Against Racism and Discrimination campaign. She's also been a part of the Law and Technology Diversity Collaborative, also known as LITD, for the last 2 years and is introducing it into AppDynamics this year. She is an AABA in-house committee co-chair and is part of the team managing the AABA in-house compensation survey to help pay equity in the Bay Area. Kriti, do you want to give us a brief plug about the in-house compensation survey?
Yes, the compensation survey will run until November 4th. We really are trying to get as much data as possible. So if you are a member of a legal team in the Bay Area, please do click on the link in the comment section to participate, or review your writing materials for access to the link. Thank you.
It is included in the MCLE materials that's posted for this event if you want to get a quick access to it as well. Thank you, Kriti. Next, I'd like to introduce Marc Fernandez. Marc is the Assistant General Counsel at Intuit. He leads the HR legal team there, and he has been there for 5 years. And before that, he worked at Diversify and MoFo. He drives Intuit's legal compliance and policy organization's anti-racism and diversity and inclusion priority, and works closely with Intuit's Diversity and Inclusion Office on company-wide initiatives. Thank you, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce Neel Chatterjee. Hi, Neel. Many of you probably know Neel from all of his great work in AABA and in the community. Neel is a partner at Goodwin's intellectual property practice, and he serves on his firm's executive committee. He's led matters for some of Silicon Valley's most legendary companies in their most significant technology disputes. He defended Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook in the famed Winklevoss case that later served as the inspiration for the Academy Award-winning film, The Social Network. And more recently, he's representing Anthony Lewandowski, who's the star engineer, the center of the complex intellectual property dispute between Google Waymo and Uber related to their self-driving car technology. Neel is a passionate proponent of diversity. He founded the Bay Area Diversity Career Center, and we hope we'll hear more about that during our panel discussion tonight. And that has been one of the most successful diversity career fairs in the United States. Thank you for joining us tonight, Neel. Oh, you're on mute. All right. Okay. Our fourth panelist tonight is Shirish Gupta. Shirish is an award-winning mediator and arbitrator with JAMS. He has a nationwide practice focusing on startup founder disputes, employment, IP, and complex commercial disputes. He teaches negotiation at UC Berkeley, UC Hastings, and Santa Clara University. He's an old friend of AABA, and we've been on panels before. And for the past few years, he's hosted an annual panel on ADR at JAMS. And he serves on JAMS Diversity Committee and JAMS CEO and D&I's task force. He's committed to diversifying the ADR field. Thank you for joining us tonight, Shirish.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Okay. And last but certainly not least is our panelist, Stephen Chen, who's Senior Corporate Counsel at Zendesk. Hi, Stephen.
Hey.
Corporate Securities, M&A, and Governance function on the legal team at Zendesk, a publicly traded software company. Prior to his time at Zendesk, he practiced corporate law in New York and at Wilson Sonsini in Palo Alto. Stephen has been involved in implementing DEI initiatives within the legal team at his company. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, while I have you, I'm going to direct my first question to Stephen. Now, Stephen, a lot of people have said that we're at an inflection point in our history right now because of the death of George Floyd and the ensuing racial justice protests all over the country. That continues. There have been a lot of protests, a lot of agitation in our community, and because of this, do you believe that these recent protests and calls for racial justice have increased your organization's D&I efforts, and have your C-suite executives and board of directors been more focused and interested in promoting diversity efforts within your organization?
Sure, thanks. I think a lot has happened this year. June was no exception. And what's been really great historically about tech companies overall and Zendesk, is no exception, is that, we have a lot of tools available for our general employee populace to really make their voices heard. I think, what we've always thought of as Zendesk, really wanted to enable is, really being in tune with what is affecting our employee populace sort of every day. And so in June, you saw a confluence of all these factors coming together with employees reaching out both on, for example, Slack channels, emails, or Zoom calls, really making their voices known and saying, look, we'd love to keep our professional faces up in these Zoom calls, but at the same time, there's a lot of things going on outside that have, really affected how we work and how productive that we feel we can be on a daily basis. And so, that was really sort of a bit of a rallying call across the company and really caught the attention of our executive staff quite quickly. And I think this felt a little bit different than, as we can be an active and very caring populace. This felt a little bit different than your average issue for good reason. After that month, we had immediately started to sort of initiate empathy circles among our employees, really to start to understand the groundwork of what needs to change. And quite frankly, I'd love to sit here today and say Zendesk has all the answers or even part of the answers. I think at the very least, you have a commitment from leadership that this is a real problem. And I think the way that has actually operationalized in our corporation, during that month, and particularly in the beginning of July, we had set certain objectives and key results that we wanted to achieve in the next quarter. Typically, of course, primarily they dealt with sort of revenue and business projections and strategy. In this particular case, we had actually incorporated making a step change improvement in diversity, inclusion, and equity initiatives across the company and that experience as one of those objectives and key results. Now, that might seem like a relatively sort of simple addition to the slate, but what that really allowed us to do was create a leader-led initiative across the company rather than sort of putting DEI initiatives in a box. We were able to cascade that OKR across each org and say, this is part of your performance to really understand what it's going to take to make an improvement in this sector. And again, sort of realizing that we just don't have all the answers in terms of how that is actually going to be done. From that, we came together with 5 key commitments to the company, which we both put publicly and internally as well, which in large part dealt with both internal sort of management and manager enablement, employee experience enablement, policy and infrastructure from releasing an equity policy across our offices worldwide, specifically investing in DEI internally and in our partnerships, for example, with our talent community and our talent acquisition teams, and also, of course, the traditional method of external impact as well. in terms of donating to organizations that we feel can make a difference. We're still early, and I can speak a little bit to sort of the legal team's initiatives, and we can get into more detail later, but in broad strokes, the legal team has focused on two primary aspects, which is our ability to have impact and influence with our outside counsels and holding them accountable to measuring up and improving in their diversity metrics over time. And also really are recruiting ourselves in terms of signing up for the Mansfield Rule Legal Department Edition, similar to Uber, US Bank, and Twilio, and a bunch of other large companies, to really require us to at least consider 50% of candidates from historically underrepresented communities, both for internal promotions and for recruiting opportunities. So happy to get into each of those as we continue our discussion today. But I guess the main point is that, to answer your question, yes, I think there was a bit of an inflection point. We had an employee-led initiative and discussion. We raised it with leadership, and then we really started to make it part of performance, which I think is a big difference than what we had in the past.
Wonderful. And do you believe that this sea change of things that companies are actively trying to put into action, as opposed to just making public pronouncements about supporting diversity, do you think that's sustainable? It's a sustainable change that's going to hold up over time, or do you think people will be fatigued and just kind of lose interest?
I think it's really I think it's a choice of each corporation, right? Like, I think you've seen some corporations decide, that what is truly a company mission, and I think that's the core question that a lot of companies have to face, in recent days. I think, as in my role as a securities lawyer, I come across sort of looking at SEC sort of regulations and also governance initiatives that have been set out by investor stakeholders in the investor community. And you're starting to see, even in those traditionally conservative communities, such as like the SEC, a lot of focus on employee stakeholders, right? And so what that means is that I think for technology companies in particular, in the past, you've had sort of manufacturing plants, tractors, right, factories, machinery that we think of as assets. In Zendesk, and just like many tech companies, the biggest asset are the employees. And I think you're seeing a little bit more on the external pressure side to say, listen, your employees and how productive they are, what affects them, what's important to them is important to the company as a whole. I think it really depends, Alison, on how much folks buy into that. I think I feel a little optimistic because there are external stakeholders that are applying such pressures at this time. But I really do think it's really key to sort of understand that it is critical to be a part of the company mission. If we see it as each leader's objective and part of their performance and how we evaluate performance at the end of the year, whether that's from a performance review to even something such as metrics or executive compensation, that's really where you get a lot of the rubber hitting the road.
Excellent. My next question is for Kriti. Can you tell us a little bit about the Law and Tech Diversity Collaborative and what AppDynamics' involvement in that is?
Sure. So I am fairly new to AppDynamics. AppDynamics is part of Cisco, and I've been part of the Law and Tech Diversity Collaborative from when I was back at Lending Club. The LITD Collaborative is a collaborative of 15 tech companies and 18 law firms and growing that actually provides a 1L summer internship program following the 1L year for law students, where we recruit from schools that don't necessarily always have opportunities to participate in OCIs at certain big law firms. And the goal of this collaborative is really to help push for diversity in big law. And the way we're doing that is that the tech companies' attorneys are actually doing the recruiting for the summer associates, and they're putting the 1L summer associates into the pipeline for these various different big law firms. We recruit from 9 law schools right now. That includes Howard, American, Santa Clara, Texas Southern, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UC Hastings, UC Irvine, and University of Miami. And we've had a bunch of summer activities for the last 2 summers. This summer, we did some great activities like a professional writing seminar, a money management seminar. We attended a motion and a hearing with Judge Lucy Coe, followed by Q&A with her. We had small group networking circles and mock interviews for all the law students. So it really gives the law students a leg up in how they can succeed in their legal career, manage their finances, connect with attorneys both in-house and in big law. And the goal of the program is to allow those students from their 1L summer to be able to get their 2L offer if their performance is on par with the expectations for a 1L summer associate. We've actually started planning for our 2021 summer program. So if you are interested in having your firm or your company join LITD, please feel free to reach out to us at the contact information on the LITD website, which is in the MCLE written materials, or you can shoot me personally a note on LinkedIn. And I know that there was a question that you had asked earlier, Alison, on what is the benefit for the law firm. And there are a lot of benefits for law firms. You're building deeper client-firm relationships. You're getting access to exceptional talent, and you don't have to do the recruiting. The in-house counsel will do the recruiting for you. And you also have the access to a bunch of other attorneys from various different tech companies in the collaborative that may not be your clients yet. So you can recruit new clients and get access to a more diverse pipeline where you might be accessing students from schools that you wouldn't normally conduct OCIs from.
That's fantastic. So it's a great way to recruit without having to expend recruiting monies from the part of the law firm, and gives you access and exposure to companies and in-house counsel that you may not necessarily be working with yet. That's fantastic. Marc, the next question is for you. Now, I know that Intuit is a participant in the Law and Tech Diversity Collaborative. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience or Intuit's experience with that program, and whether you have engaged the 1Ls after their summer internship program?
Yeah, absolutely. Kriti spoke about it well, but Intuit participated for the first time last year. Historically, Intuit does not hire attorneys straight out of law school. We typically hire after folks have been at outside counsel for a few years, but we've had an internship program for many years, which was a little bit, it lacked focus a little bit. We thought it was important. We brought in, we created good experiences for law students, but it didn't necessarily create a trajectory towards an actual career for them because we weren't going to hire them. And so we took a step back and kind of partnered with LITD to really kind of focus more truly on the 1L experience, focus truly on diverse legal talent. And just like Kriti said, we put, it's a little bit of pressure that we put on the law firms, right? And, it's kind of like, well, we expect you to be walking the walk along with us. And so here's a pipeline for diverse talent, which you probably normally wouldn't potentially consider. And happy to say that our interns from this last year, they got offers for their 2L summer, and we continue to maintain relationships with them. But and hopefully in a few years after they get some experience, they'll be interested in coming back to Intuit perhaps, or tackling whatever kind of career trajectory that resonates with them. But overall, it's been a great experience, and has really kind of helped us be more focused on our overall diversity efforts, both internally, but also at the community at large, as we kind of work to move the needle in the profession, not just our own internal team.
Wonderful. Marc, can you tell us a little bit more about what other diversity initiatives that Intuit's currently engaged in that you can highlight for us in terms of what you're particularly proud of or think would be successful in terms of diversifying your recruiting efforts and your employee base?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Stephen kind of hit on the fact that, June was a true inflection point. I mean, many CEOs made, fantastic public statements, but, kind of like the title of this presentation, you need to walk the walk. You need to do more than post something nice on social media. So for the first time ever, we just recently refreshed our company values, and diversity and inclusion is specifically called out in those values, which it historically wasn't. And aligned with that, we've set specific company-wide goals to basically, we want our internal employees to represent the communities that we serve, and really leaning into the fact that we believe, and the good thing is the science bears out, that better outcomes are produced by diverse teams. And so really trying to appropriately lean into diversity. It has become a top-down initiative where I think historically it's been, we've been able to have good gains on diversity in the past, but it was more kind of ad hoc based on individual leaders' passions and things like that. And so we're being much more specific, declarative, and holding leaders accountable. I don't think we have gotten as far as Steven's team has, which I envy, of really having a direct connection to actual compensation and things like that. But I believe that's to come. Within the legal department specifically, like I said, we're involved in the law and tech collaborative to focus on diversity in our professions. We're also have a strategic mentorship program where we partner with local nonprofits to mentor high school students, things like the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League and other organizations like that, where our internal team members can work hands-on with high school students who are interested in law, who otherwise might not have role models who have gone that path, and kind of demystify the process for them. And we've also stepped into the space of, not just focused on our professions and ourselves, but making an impact on the community at large in anti-racism initiatives. So one thing that we're focusing right now is the election. And so we have a campaign internally, basically partnering with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and doing election protection work as much as we can between now and the election. So those are a few things. We're have a lot of other things that are ongoing. We're kind of early in our overall journey in this space, and really trying to build something that endures. We don't want that this is just the year that we talk about these issues. We need to build it into the DNA of the organization so that it lives on and truly becomes part of our operating mechanisms, and not just, something that just we forget about as we move to other priorities.
That sounds wonderful. And it's really, I hear over and over again how important it is to provide mentorship and training to diverse talent, so that ensures their path to success. So I'm really glad to hear that. I'd like to direct my next question to Neel. So Neel, what initiatives at Goodwin have you seen that have been successful in actually increasing diversity within your firm? And I know you guys boast a very impressive number of diverse attorneys at your firm. And so what do you believe has led to that success, and what specific programs or initiatives have you believed to be effective in actually increasing diversity?
Yeah, so thanks everyone for having me here today. I appreciate it. Goodwin has almost too many diversity programs in some ways, because it gets kind of unwieldy to know about all the different things we do. I think a lot of our diversity success, where we really have been successful overall, is in promotion of women. And that goes back to the fact that Goodwin was the first AmLaw 100 firm led by a woman. And I'm going to talk about some of our programs and everything, but I think representation at the top, and not only the symbolic, but the actual achievement-oriented nature of people who have those significant leadership roles, dramatically affects recruitment, retention, and promotion. So I really think that the selection of Regina Pisa, she was our chair 2 times before the current chair, was really material. In terms of programs, we work really hard to maintain and improve our Mansfield certification. We work a lot with Diversity Lab on a bunch of different things, but we do that. We're very active in legal on-ramp. And we also, for now almost 20 years, the firm has had something that we call a diversity fellowship. And that's a really important program we have for junior lawyers. So the Diversity Fellowship is a scholarship, essentially, or payment for a summer job, essentially, for first-year law students. And we have an application process for students that are in law schools all over the country. And we basically pay them to work in the public interest for the summer. But in addition to working in a public interest job that they're interested in, they get a law firm mentor. It's a partner in the law firm. And they get to bypass OCI, and they get an automatic callback to the firm. And that's really great because it's really supporting early lawyer development. 2, it's getting these lawyers access to fairly senior people and allies early on. And 3, it really helps us on recruitment. My first mentee was 2 years ago, and she will be joining our group and working with me in just about a week. We have people who are now partners in the firm that receive their first job as a diversity fellow within the firm. We also do work with clients on the programs like Kriti was discussing, where we have summer associates. Internally, I would say that the biggest challenge we have is retention. We actually do fairly well on beginning associates. So in our first year associate class, we're normally 50% or higher on lawyers who are diverse in some way. As I said before, we do a lot better with women than ethnically diverse people, and we do fairly well with LGBTQ folks as well. What we've noticed, though, is in the 4 to 8 year level that there's a fair amount of attrition, a lot of attrition among the diverse population, and a lesser attrition among non-diverse folks. So we're very focused on that. And one of our efforts that one of the things we try and implement is we try and implement programs internally to improve the retention of diverse lawyers, because we've publicly stated that by 2025, we want our partner and equity partner promotions to match the diversity of our incoming classes. So with our incoming class, if we're at 55%, we want our partner and equity partner classes to have that same number in terms of diversity. Some of the things that we're doing along those lines is we've launched a program that we call mentorship pods. And basically we try and get kind of mid-level associates together with a senior partner, where they kind of create an ecosystem to talk about what challenges they're facing and create a mutually supportive environment and some sponsorship. At the partner level, we have 2 tiers of partnership, equity and non-equity. For each diverse non-equity partner, there's a member of the executive committee. The executive committee is one of the committees that leads the firm. I'm part of the executive committee at Goodwin, where each executive committee member is assigned to work with a non-equity partner to kind of get them over the finish line of equity partnership if that's their career goal. Some of the other things we do is we have something called the CRED retreat, which is the Committee on Racial and Ethnic Diversity. We do an annual retreat for all the lawyers in the firm. And we normally do a very big event at the end, both for clients and for associates. We do a lot of kind of outreach. We have been involved in Silicon Valley Urban Debate League. And just recently, we formed a partnership with San Jose State University. I didn't know this until recently, but San Jose State actually has a class for students who aren't in law school yet, but are interested in legal studies, to do legal clearance projects for people who maybe were wrongly convicted or who have now gotten out of jail, and want to get certain rights back. And the classes are about 80% diverse. And in addition to that, most of the people there are the first people in their family to go to college. And so the partnership that we're working on striking with them is really to have a lawyer at Goodwin work on these record clearance projects. We're going to have the lawyers be relatively junior because it'll be their first opportunities to go to court and get that experience. But then they can also act as a mentor for the law student or for the college students who are interested in going to law school and may think it's a little unattainable or hard to get at, and really to kind of add a human component to let them know that this is achievable. I guess the two other things that I'll mention is we've started a program internally that we call BPOTS, which is be part of the solution. And really it's an allyship program in a lot of ways where we're doing firm-wide education programs about various issues involving race in the law. So in just a couple of days, I'm going to be on a team with a former person from the Federal Elections Commission and a person who worked with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice when the Voting Rights Act was passed to talk about voting rights and race in America. And then we have a whole bunch of a series internally of those topics. And one of the great things about BPOTS was it was originally started by some secretaries in the firm that really thought this would be a good dialogue. And then a number of other people joined in to work with them, but they're still driving the agenda on building awareness inside the firm. Those are just a handful of types of things that we do. And we continue to try and iterate and improve. I'll just be candid. I don't think we've completely worked out the retention challenges that we face. And right now we're kind of in a mode where we're experimenting on a ton of different things to see what works and what doesn't.
No, I'll definitely try to steal from you if you do figure the retention piece out. My next question is for Shirish. So JAMS came out very recently with a very strongly worded and public statement in response to something that it disagreed with from one of its own neutrals. Can you tell us about this and how that incident has motivated JAMS to increase or invigorate its diversity efforts?
Sure. So first of all, the caveat, I don't speak for JAMS. I am not a JAMS representative here. I'm an independent contractor with JAMS, and that's how our neutrals are. So what happened was back in early part of the summer, one of our neutrals forwarded a racist email to over 30 of his family members plus lawyers, including an attorney that was appearing before him. That attorney objected. There was an investigation done, and that neutral is no longer with JAMS. I wish it could be that simple, but it's not, because when something like that happens, that causes an organization to reflect and figure out, okay, how did we get here? What do we do as an organization to make sure it's clear to everyone here and to the outside world that these aren't the values that we stand for, that we abhor racism, and that it has no place at JAMS. Just like it has no place at any of the companies or the law firms here. So we made the statement, but the statement alone isn't enough. So we started looking internally at our processes and started looking at training, at recruiting, at business development. So all of those things are on the table. The CEO created a task force on diversity, and I've been serving on that ever since it was created. We meet regularly. We came up with 5 broad areas that we believe that the organization should focus on. In addition, for the first time since I've been there, we're finally going to have a list of the diverse neutrals, and that's going to be a public list. It's something that I've been asking for quite a while, but now we're going to get it done. In addition, we just completed mandatory D&I training of the panel. The board composition at JAMS has changed to focus more on diversity. And we've expressed both a short-term and a long-term commitment to diversity. So all of our processes are in play, in essence. We're looking at changes in strike list composition so that when parties are presented with strike lists, that we make sure that there is diversity on there. Some of our offices were already doing this, but we're looking to make sure JAMS is looking to make sure that this is happening company-wide. And another big area is it's not just enough to recruit. We have to make sure that our JAMS neutrals are utilized. And so we're looking on how to promote or increase the promotion. And I'll be frank, that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, because AABA was in talks with JAMS, and they said, we need to make sure that we have opportunities for our diverse neutrals. And so this is it. They asked me, would you like to speak? And I said, absolutely. So there are many areas that we are working on. I'm also part of the mentorship and sponsorship committee. So we're making sure that every neutral that comes in has a mentor, and making sure that it's not just, you've been here for a couple of years, you're on your own, but it's something that keeps, it's a process that we make sure that you succeed, or that our fellow diverse neutrals succeed, because it's important for the organization and it's important for the legal profession that we as arbitrators who have final say on your matters represent the community, and not just the legal community, but the broader society. So those are some of the changes that we've implemented as a result.
It's really impressive. You've gotten so much done. All right. This next question is for Kriti. So when there's all this discussion and debate about racial equity and the Black Lives Matter movement, sometimes we also experience opposition voices within our own organizations who don't necessarily are aligned with what the organization itself is putting out as their public mission and their commitments. So have you encountered that within your organization, and how have you dealt with that?
Yes, so Cisco, it was, I think, the first or second week when I had joined the company, and Cisco executives, Chuck Robbins, went live in our Cisco check-in, which addresses all of our Cisco employees and our subsidiaries, and said, we support Black Lives Matter as a movement, and we don't believe that Black Lives Matter is a political issue. So in that presentation, we got some comments from employees who said things like, Black lives don't matter, all lives matter, Black Lives Matter perpetuates racism, and then people who complain about racism have probably been racist. Just a bunch of very offensive, derogatory comments were posted in the chat by employees of Cisco and their subsidiaries, and we took a very firm stance on it. We don't tolerate racism at Cisco or AppDynamics, and the employees who posted these comments were brought in to HR for educational purposes, and some of them did issue public apologies for their comments, and others were terminated. And we were in the news for people speaking up about this and being terminated for what we felt were racist remarks. So Cisco's taken a very firm stance on the BLM movement, and I'm very proud that they have done that, and I stand by that. I do know that there has been a lot of news about this that has been published that has been conflicting, but Cisco stands by what it has done, its actions and its statements.
Thank you, Kriti. So same question to you, Marc. In terms of any kind of contrary voices or opposition to what Intuit's trying to do in support of the Black Lives Matter movement or for racial justice causes, how have you addressed those voices within your organization?
Yeah, especially in my line of work, supporting the HR team, there's whenever you take a position like we have, there's going to be detractor voices. And I think the main thing, we've tried to lean into education wherever possible, try to be respectful that people may have views, but just like Kriti says, racism has no place at the workplace, and we don't condone that, but we do try to engage in respectful conversation. People can have different views on law enforcement and things like that, and so it's tricky. It's certainly an area where we try to be very delicate, try to be very respectful, but also firm in what we believe in and what we stand in. So we've even kind of develop some principles to how we approach these kinds of situations and conversations. But, I wouldn't say that we're always perfect, but we try our best to just maintain that culture of being respectful of each other. And especially at a time where I think we're all kind of learning. The George Floyd murder certainly made me second guess a lot of my education and some things that I have believed in the past. And so I think we want to encourage people to not be afraid to have a conversation, but also always make sure that that conversation is fully respectful of everyone.
Yeah. And I guess in pursuit of having respectful conversations, even with uncomfortable topics, have you found, things like the ABA 21-day challenge or having empathy circles and things like that, has that been helpful in increasing the dialogue and the understanding within your organization?
It has. We've done the ABA challenge in our legal organization. We haven't done a whole lot of kind of organized roundtables throughout Intuit, but certainly have set up kind of opportunities for those conversations. I'd say that the challenge, to be honest, right now, with us all virtual, with us all kind of dealing with children at home and things like that, you want to encourage that kind of activity, but you don't want it to become burdensome. You want the energy to maintain. And so that's one thing that we're trying to balance of like, all right, you can go out and do all this stuff, but we also all have day jobs and things like that. So you need to understand where the people are at the time and make sure that they have the energy to engage. Otherwise, you're just kind of, at least in my view, sometimes just pushing out more and more information, but it becomes overwhelming at times. And so you need to find the way that resonates with people so that they can actually digest. I mean, that's kind of been my experience, but I think everybody's in a very different place on this stuff.
No, it's certainly. Oh, go ahead, Kriti.
I just wanted to share the Cisco and AppDynamics projects that we're working on. We actually converted the ABA 21-day reading challenge into a 14-week reading challenge that included assignments with an international focus, since a lot of our attorneys are based in various different countries. And we made it a program that is an opt-out program. Everyone in the legal, sales, and marketing team, or supporting the sales and marketing team in Cisco Legal, which is fairly large, is opted in, is automatically in various different reading groups, kind of like a book club, and they participate in this. So if you are not able to participate, you have to actively opt out, which is great because it really promotes people to actually look at the syllabus. What are the reading assignments? They're very curious about it. The assignments are really short. They're fairly easy to get through. And then you have great dialogue from people, not only based in various different places of the US, but all over the world, and contributing to the discussion. So we've had talks about racism, colorism, colonialism, whether reparations should be made for slavery, and so much more in just the first 4 weeks of our program. And then we also have programs like the Pledge for the Multiplier Effect, which I believe many different companies are involved in, where leaders commit to sponsoring an employee who's either female or part of an underrepresented group. And sponsoring means advocating for a person in their career and removing barriers for them. So it's much more involved than mentorship. And data that we have shows that people with sponsors are progressing at a higher rate within the organization. So this combined with, we have about 15 different initiatives going on within Cisco and more within AppDynamics to actually help promote diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the company. It's had a real remarkable effect on people understanding their unconscious bias and promoting underrepresented groups within the company.
Wow, that is impressive. And for those of you who are interested, all of Cisco's public initiatives are in the MCLE materials for you to check out. It is, if you have a moment, do check it out. It is it's very inspiring. Now, Stephen, I want to come back to you on my next question about it's great to have these initiatives and to push forward all these programs to increase diversity, but how do we measure or track success as to whether any of these initiatives are working? And so that, if they're not working, then that can be a barometer for us to change what we're doing, or to maybe explore other initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest question to answer of all these things. And I think, sort of what we're getting at, I think in all these initiatives, hearing the great work at Cisco or at Intuit, it's really getting at sort of how do we have a community which has historically not had as successful of a pathway as other communities, and how do we enable that and change that for the better? And frankly, we're talking about like a very, a hierarchical system of power, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about managers, we're talking about executives and leadership, and we're talking about things that are really hard to change at the end of the day, in terms of implicit bias, who gets invited to the weekend ski event, right? And, how does that affect your career path? And so these are really pernicious trends that are really hard to get at. And you're right. Like, I think at the end of the day, to sort of rise above that, like, you really have to sort of figure out what looks like success, right, for your organization. I think, there's a lot of ways to measure it. But I think, just with discussions of external stakeholders and other in-house counsels and leaders in the community, they really center around a couple. The first one is recruiting, right? Like, how many people are applying to your systems? And that's actually a really hard metric to track, right? Because if you think about it, you don't get this self-identification until somebody voluntarily does so when they're applying to the system. And that's fine for a lot of purposes, but in terms of understanding pipeline, your overall talent community, sort of sourcing overall, it's really hard, because you're talking about, like, unfortunate, like, needs of how do you identify members of certain groups who don't voluntarily identify, right? So there's challenges there. But certainly, what the Mansfield rule is getting at is really at least trying to set some sort of barometer for at least numerically understanding who is applying, who's succeeding, and who's getting considered. The second thing is internal promotion rates and retention. I think hopefully most companies at this point, and I think the ones, at least folks that I've talked to, is that they have like scorecards, right, that say, hey, here's certain groups within the company, here's their representation within the company, here's their levels of seniority, here's how often they're getting promoted, and here's the levels of involuntary and voluntary attrition at the end of any given quarter or year. And I think that's really, really important to track, because however many initiatives that you have out there, if you don't have an environment where you're encouraging, if you're encouraging these folks to succeed, it's just not gonna reflect in the results. And the reality is that it's easy to throw up your hands and say, this is a hard problem. There are higher attrition rates, there are lower recruiting rates. It's due to the Bay Area, it's due to XYZ, it's due to X level of education. But the reality is that some companies are actually better at it, right? If you talk to some companies and they are known for promoting positive environments and promoting areas in which you can be your whole self in conversations and discussions with leadership and really feel like you can succeed, it actually works, right? And so I think there's a little bit of this false narrative where, you know, we call it a hard problem, right? And then just say like, yeah, we're doing all these things, right? But, you know, how does that actually change your results at the end of the day? I think is where the rubber hits that road. In terms of executive compensation, you know, obviously, we haven't made those changes yet. We're sort of considering them, and a lot of external stakeholders have put it out there. I think that's something that all companies generally should at least have on their slate to consider. You know, executive compensation overall is obviously sort of heavily scrutinized by regulators, by, you know, outside companies such as, you know, Institutional Shareholder Services or Glass Lewis, that actually give out ratings. And then there's a whole another cottage industry. Well, cottage industry might be the wrong term, but another industry where folks are sort of tracking ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance factors, such as Sustainalytics, that have become, you know, come up with their proprietary ratings that entities such as, you know, State Street is particularly, and Vanguard are particularly sort of vocal in this regard. You're seeing sort of a lot more external pressure to say, listen, if you're not going to be externally accountable for that, right, then putting out like metrics and like holding yourself to those metrics, I think, you know, then what's the point, right? Like you can have a million initiatives and like, you know, not seeing change, I think is really, you know, where you got to focus. Zendesk, I think, has a lot of work to get there. Right now, we have our D&I statistics publicly available in terms of our racial and ethnic composition. You know, our board of directors composition is obviously public, and we have work to do. But in terms of all the other metrics that I think we're, you know, especially public companies are now receiving more pressure on to really be more transparent about it, whether it's from the SEC or whether it's from shareholders. I think you'll see, Alison, a lot of increasing disclosure on that over time. I think it's going to take a while. I think, you know, when you think about, you know, sort of releasing involuntary attrition or voluntary attrition numbers, especially for ethnic groups, I think that is something that is very uncomfortable for many company executives and people like me, like the Disclosure Council, to like really stomach. It's hard, it's new, but I think it's a muscle that we got to exercise and really hold ourselves accountable to. So Zendesk, we're working on it. It's early days for us, but it's certainly something that we're seeing in the market and in entities that are sort of looking at us and other companies.
That's wonderful. So Shirish, I think I have time for maybe one more question for you before we jump into our questions and answer phase. So we know that there's talk about the lack of diversity within the judiciary, and we know that a lot of the neutrals that come to JAMS are former members of the judiciary. And so in order to increase the diversity of your neutrals, what kind of things are you guys considering to increase your pipeline of having more diverse neutrals, and why is that important in terms of having diverse neutrals for parties and attorneys that are looking for you and selecting you for their cases?
Sure. So the second part I've already addressed, but it's basically legitimacy. If we don't look like the general population, then people might not believe that we share their concerns or understand what they're going through. And so we might not be as effective in that sense. But as to the first part of the question, you're absolutely right in that if what we're doing is we're only recruiting from the judicial pool, and the judicial pool is diversifying extremely slowly, and as we've seen with the appointments in the last year at the federal level, if that's what we rely on, we're not going to get there. So what we're doing is we've looked beyond retired judges. I, for example, am not a retired judge, and many of my colleagues are not. And we're looking at retired judges and non-retired judges, and that's basically it. When that's the pool that you go from. But in terms of getting people interested in the career, though, that's a space that we are putting more effort into. For example, I was on a prep call earlier today for an ACC presentation, and one of the my co-panelists, who's in-house counsel, said, "I didn't know you could be a neutral and not be a retired judge." And so she said, "Well, is this something that I could do?" So it's when we go out there and we show them that this is a possible career path for you. I think that changes people's minds, and it opens them up to the opportunity and just start thinking about themselves as maybe that's something that I want to do. I could do that. I have that skill set. And then we follow that up with, hey, if you'd like to find out what it's like, shadow me for a day. Assuming that the parties all consent, you can see what it's like to be mediation. We'll talk privately during breaks so you can see why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that way you can see, would you like doing this or not? Or would you just want to, just bash the parties' heads in and say, I know where you're going to end up, just take this deal and move on. So there's, right now, I think there's a renewed focus on building that pipeline and letting people know that it's an opportunity for them and that's an option for them. GEMS may not be the best fit for people, and that's fine. I'm looking at this going, we just need more diverse neutrals, period, wherever they are. And then we need to make sure that they're getting the work because it does no good to have the supply without the demand. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure law firms have been the key, in-house counsel have been the key driver on this, especially in diversifying law firms. And I think that the two of them combined can be helpful in diversifying the legal profession, the ADR profession, So I'm looking forward to what the next 5 to 10 years have in store.
Great.
Yeah, Alison, I wanted to follow up on that. We also been rolling out a program to use our limited influence as a client to try to really affect some impact on our outside counsels. Last year we had rolled out sort of putting together diversity scorecards for each of our law firms, where we say listen, you have X percentage from historically underrepresented minorities. We issue that at the end of the year. We have a difficult conversation with some law firms, and hopefully, that altogether inspires some additional effort internally. Additionally, we've rolled out a bit of a preferred provider program where if you meet certain eligibility requirements and certain measurements, we sort of, quote, promote you to a set of law firms that we would reach out to first when it comes to new matters. One of those qualifications are really understanding sort of the eligible matters that we put out per quarter. And to hold us accountable, we want to make sure that the amount of eligible matters that are assigned to relationship partners or law firms that are owned by or led by minority attorneys are getting assigned at least X percentage, right, of the eligible matters that are being put out there. So not only do you have sort of a sense of, hey, there's got to be at least some amount of billable hours that are assigned to underrepresented teams, but also, quite frankly, really equally as important, finding sort of the relationship provider that I think gives a little bit more oomph to sort of saying we care about actually putting people that are from underrepresented backgrounds in front of us and building that relationship. So we're still rolling that out now, but I think that it's going to be sort of really successful from that perspective. So yeah, no, agreed with Shirish on all of that.
No, I mean, for all of you in-house folks, I definitely do not underestimate your power. I think the reason diversity has moved and the reason we've seen improvement is because of pressure from companies and from in-house counsel to make sure that their law firms do diversify in a meaningful way. So thank you for your efforts, and then thank you for the push. I don't think we would see any progress were it not for that. So I think we are at 6:07. I do want to leave some time for questions and answers. We do have one question that I'm going to read out loud. And Neel has volunteered to take this on. So the question is, would you deal with detractors in a volunteer-run networking organization if they don't participate in any of the diversity talks?
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that. I don't know the age of all the people participating on this call today, but I've been doing this for a little while. Shirish has been doing it for a little while, and I started during an era where I had never met an Indian lawyer before I became one. This year, Goodwin made 2 equity partners, 2 non-equity partners, and hired 2 other partners that were all of South Asian descent. 6 more lawyers than I ever had met that were South Asian when I started practicing. So when I started doing this stuff a little bit before Shirish, and we would try and get South Asian lawyers together in a high school classroom because we could all fit in there and leave a lot of seats behind. There were a lot of questions on identity about what is the purpose of the organization. Is it because we're all young professionals who are 24, 25 years old, a thing where we can all get together and date each other? Is it a business networking thing? Is it a professional development thing? What is it? And there were always detractors on what the vision should be. And when you were only 10 people, there wasn't a lot of room to have a lot of different missions because there were only 10 or so of us. The world's changed today, right? This AABA group alone probably has a distribution of well over 100, 150 people, maybe even more than that. If you go to NAPABA, it's 2,000 people. There are always going to be people who choose to not participate in NAPABA or AABA. There are always going to be people who choose to not participate in individual organizations. But for those people who are believers in the cause, the first and most important thing you need to know is that our mission is succeeding. And the second and most important thing to know is that for those people that are naysayers, the single thing that changes the most is when you are successful at something, and then everyone wants to be part of it. And I'll just, you had said at the beginning, I talked about the diversity career fair. When we founded that, we really didn't know who was going to show up, but we wanted to make sure that people had a good experience and that law firms had a good experience and students had a good experience. And it was terrifying because there were tons of people saying, why on earth are you going to do this? Everyone goes on campus. All the recruiting's done that way. But the first year when all the law firms came back and said, we're seeing better candidates from schools we don't go to that are diverse from all over the country, and the law students said the word out to their colleagues that it was a great place to go if you wanted to be in the Bay Area. Now it's in its 20th year and it sees 400 plus students a year with 60 or so schedules from law firms because every law firm jumped on board because it was successful.
Thank you, Neel. All right. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. And I think just so you all know, AABA actually has over 1,000 members.
Yeah, I didn't know it had that many. I was actually thinking of the AABA in-house counsel committee, but the AABA I'm sure has a huge. I mean, when I go to the dinners, it's a huge event.
It is. It's truly a gala, and I'm going to put a plug out for all of you attending today. If you're not AABA members, please join. You will get to participate and have great discussions and conversations like this for free if you're a member. And I've been told if you join because of this event today, you will get 3 months of free membership through the end of the year with your membership for next year. All right. So one question, what advice do you have for smaller organizations or law firms for launching diversity initiatives if they don't have a lot of people?
I'll throw out one. So I'm gonna push back maybe a little bit with what Stephen was saying about the scorecards. I think the scorecards are really, really helpful, but people don't hire you for a really important matter because you're diverse. They hire you because you're really good at what you do. And I have a lot of friends. I was actually just on a Zoom call with somebody 2 days ago where they're a smaller firm and they're really trying to make a name for themselves. And they're an all diverse organization. It's a great litigation practice down in LA. And I said, it's important for you to talk about your diversity, but you need to start by saying, we're great litigators. We go to court and we solve major problems for you. And if you want to include a value proposition that we're cheaper than big law, that's not a bad thing to advertise either. People are going to know you're diverse just by looking at your website and the teams that you're presenting. And when you have your bios that describe the organizations you're interested in. But if you lead with, I'm diverse, so hire me, that is not necessarily the value proposition when people have to, they have to have some cover internally that they're hiring someone that's actually good at what they do. And I think a lot of people get that backwards.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, at the end of the day, like when you're talking about a bet the company litigation, bet the company M&A, right? Like you're looking at a company or a law firm that is going to support you to the best of their abilities and to the best in the market. So I absolutely agree. I think sort of like our way of splitting the baby on that, I don't know if that's a term that we should use. A way of compromising anymore is sort of, issuing that scorecard to the extent that when we have identified that strategic partner, right, that we have multiple year negotiations with, Goodwin being one of them, in terms of having that fixed fee versus our strategic transactions over the year, that we're going to have that long-term relationship, and that long-term relationship includes the expectation that we should see improvement here, right? That you have a reach within the market, and there is no excuse after X number of years. Goodwin, for the record, has been a great partner in that. But no, like sort of what you're saying, I completely agree, Neel, in terms of at the end of the day, diversity is one of the things, that is sort of what we look at. I'd say that at least internally, what our push has been with our leader-led initiatives, rather than say, if, for example, we had a town hall yesterday, and sort of a lot of people were asking, hey, how come our global head of diversity and inclusion, who we just got from Wall Street Journal, she's an amazing individual, why isn't she talking about the initiative? We had specifically put up our SVP of engineering to talk about what he was doing within the organization, and did not even put up the head of D&I in there. And that was extremely intentional, and there was a little bit of debate around it for sure. And the reason for that is that I think there's a tendency on all these initiatives to put these initiatives in a box and say, this is the diversity initiative, right? And sort of like call it a day and like compartmentalize and say, they got it handled. I think what we need to do is to start to say, diversity is a proxy for performance in many ways, to say, like, we are, as sort of, I believe it was either one of the panelists sort of mentioned that there's been studies out there, for example, the HBR study recently that studied the VC performance and how VCs that were less homogenous actually financially perform better than the ones that didn't, and really start to ingrain that in our head. But at the end of the day, Neel, it's yeah, you're right. It's about, you can't sacrifice performance, and so it's all of the above.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're not sacrificing anything. There are darn good, diverse attorneys and neutrals out there. We just don't know of them sometimes, or we don't, maybe have faith in ourselves to choose them. But I recently met one of my colleagues who was a chief judge on his court for 20 years. That man knows federal law. And I was like, why isn't his calendar completely booked up?
I think that's also where diverse bar associations come into play. Organizations like AABA and APABA, you can really leverage those organizations as a small organization or a small law firm to find a diverse pipeline of attorneys to join your organization, or if you have diversity initiatives that you want to start or that you are trying to talk about, leverage those networks to build start a CLE event and build a conversation. Start one of those 21-day ABA reading challenges, maybe with another organization, so you can build your network that way. There's a lot of different ways that you can get your name out and also bring diversity into your organization using these various different bar association opportunities.
I completely agree. One other prong of our legal team initiative is that we've mandated every member to pick one affinity organization to build a relationship with, and check in with them at least once a quarter. What we found in recruiting is that there's a bit of a false narrative of saying like there isn't X minority in X Y area, and as Shirish was saying, that's just not true. I mean, there are candidates out there. It's just the existing networks that are amenable to the LinkedIn application, right? Or being able to just immediately throw over a job rec to AABA, for example. Those are the type of networks that you can leverage for minority groups that may not have the traditional path. And I think we need to get out of the Bay Area is hard for XYZ, and more, there are good candidates out there. You don't have to sacrifice. You just got to do the work. So.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, let me just add something to that. So SABA launched this SABA referral network email distribution, where if anyone has whatever need around the country that could be legal in nature, whether it's wills and trusts, personal injury, local counsel, whatever it is, you can just send an email to the email distribution and say, I'm looking for someone who does X in X jurisdiction. And I mean, I've had so many random things that I've looked for, and I got to tell you, every time there's going to be 2 or 3 South Asian lawyers around the country, no matter how random it is, that the South Asian Bar Association brings up, and that I get referrals on, and it makes me feel really good, and like that I can kind of hook people up with folks from the South Asian legal community.
You're here.
And for folks that don't know, SABA stands for the South Asian Bar Association. It's like NAPABA for South Asian lawyers.
Yeah. There's also a similar kind of email distribution, as I understand it, for women general counsels that has 500 or 600 people on the distribution, where they people will ask for referrals and things like that. It's a really simple way to kind of just spread the word and get referrals.
All right. So I think we are 5 minutes past our time, but thank you all so much to our wonderful panelists for all of their insight, for their candor and wisdom in telling us about their initiatives that they're pursuing at their organizations, and how they're moving the needle to increase diversity in the legal profession. Thank you all for your time, and for all of our attendees, thank you so much for participating and attending this panel discussion today. Please do fill out an evaluation form for us so that we can, we read them all, and we do take your comments seriously so that we can plan future events like this for you all. And so thank you once again for attending today's panel presentation, and for our wonderful panelists. Keep up the great work. We're looking to you for leadership and keeping up the fight, the good fight. So thank you all. Have a good evening.